Good morning, everyone. I'm Craig Finnestead. I'm the pastor here at the Water's Edge. If you're new with us, thanks so much for being here today. We hope that you'll come back and give us a try a few more times. It's the best time of the year to try a new church. Have a few big Sundays coming up, and we just love to get to know you. We know that you'd make our church better, and we want to be a better church. So thank you so much for visiting us this morning. For those of you online, thanks for watching. Put in the comment section about how God is speaking to you, and it's one way you can worship together as a community. A little bit of business before I get started. We have a middle school camp that's pretty much wrapping up right now. It's up at Camp Rivercrest, so I know that many of you dropped your middle schoolers off on Friday. They're coming back after worship today. They have had a great time. It's just it looks like they're just having a lot of fun up there. And I'm assuming that some of you who dropped them off have had a good time too. But that ends in an hour and 7 minutes. You have to pick them up. Chad is done with them at noon. So prom was last night for Millard West. So anybody went to prom last night? Anybody? Yeah, we see how much these kids actually love Jesus, huh? No, it's cool to see all those kids just growing up, and they look so cool. So that was a lot of fun. We'll look forward to having them back with us next weekend. So with Belize, we do 2 international missions right now. One is in Uganda, one is in Belize. So we're taking our biggest Belize trip ever. Sorry, AJ, I think I just broke your thing. Let's take Chad's paycheck. He's not here today. So we need $10,000 to support this group that's going. Now, we're as an efficient and effective a charity as you're going to find. 100% of what you give goes directly to people in Belize that buys medicine, medical supplies for them. You guys are so great with all the glasses you brought in, all the other stuff as well. But we need $10,000. We've taken in 6, so we needed 4 last week, which was that'd be a huge offering for us. And you all did it. You gave $6,500 last week, so we took in $12,500 for the Belize offering, and that's just awesome. You guys have resourced them and helped them be successful, and I am just so grateful for your generosity. We're in the middle of a series called Signs. We're actually doing a sermon series on every single one of these signs. So next week is Palm Sunday. We're going to do the one that's called Parade Route. So this was the most famous parade in human history. Jesus and his people and some assorted animals went into Jerusalem. Now, the message of Palm Sunday is really one of the high points of the church year. We'll have a little parade next week with all the kids coming through the palm branches. But the message of Palm Sunday is this, and this is why I want you to come next week. Jesus entered Jerusalem. And what we do on Palm Sunday is we ask Jesus to enter more deeply into our lives. So it's a time of reflection. It's a time of grace for us. That one's next week. Scenic Overlook is way over there to your right, next to the yield sign. That one we're doing for a sermon called Monday, Thursday. So a week from Thursday night, 6:30. Have you ever seen one of those scenic overlook signs? Like sometimes it's not planned, but you just stop because there's something beautiful to look at. And on that night, there's something beautiful to look at, and that is Jesus is gathered with the disciples for the last time, and they share the meal one more last time, and we get together and we share the meal with each other, and we share the meal with Jesus, and that's something beautiful to look at. Then the next day, on your far left is Dead End. That's Good Friday. It's actually not a dead end. The world thought it was a dead end, but it's not. But Good Friday is such an important service for us, and here's why. That was the day that Jesus died. And that's the day that the things in us that need to die can die. You know, the self-destructive behaviors, the hurtful things, the habits we just need to get rid of, those can die, and then a few days later, they can be resurrected into new life, new things. So we have a number of Easter services. Now, the first is the middle one. One of the middle ones is going to be on 6:30 a.m. on Sunday morning. It will be different than all the rest of them. It's just going to be on the east side of the building over here, and we have it timed. We've done this in the past, where during the service, you'll actually see the sun rise over the city. It starts in the dark and it ends in the light. It's a short service. It's about a half hour long or so. But as the worship leader is going to be singing, you'll actually see the sun rise behind him, and we'll share in the Lord's Supper Sunday morning as well. Now, we have 4 identical Easter services. The sign there is End Road Work. So we're doing one on Saturday night. This is for people that want to be free on Saturday morning. It's also to free up some spaces here in this room on Sunday morning. Just like last year, we're expecting an overflow crowd. So if you're kind of ambivalent, you can come to Saturday evening. We'll have our first Easter service on Saturday evening. Then we'll do 3 on Sunday morning. So 2 weeks from today, different times that week only, 8 o'clock, 9:30, and 11. All right, so we got another sign today. Now, if the city of Omaha were to be honest and put this one where they needed to go, it would go bankrupt by the time it got to 24th Street. And everything west of that would be out of luck. So we're going to take a poll here real quick. I want everyone to participate. So if you have hit a pothole in the last 6 weeks, please raise your hand. Okay, you guys don't have as good of a view as I do, so that's 100%. All right, so for those of you who have actually had to go get the tire fixed, raise your hand. A lot less. A pastor's favorite number is 10%. So we'll say that 10% had a flat tire. And did anyone actually have to go get your rim fixed? There wasn't anybody. We have one. So there's 2 of us because my son ran into one. And if there's 400 people here and there's 2 of us, that's 0.5%. But preachers round up, so we'll do 1%. Now, you guys didn't know this. I'm obsessive compulsive, and all my ones have to be the same. This is killing me. There we go. My mom would be so proud of me. All right, so this first picture was taken at 168th and Center. So what happened is the rock climbing wall at Lifetime Fitness broke. And they were sending all their climbers out to 168th and Center. And this guy is going back to the gym and showering after this. Now, it's not only affecting drivers, it's affecting another group of people, bicyclists, and he's going to have to get that room fixed. Now, the rim fixed. The problem is there's 2 bicyclists in Omaha who are actually missing, and they want to find them before the potholes are filled in. So, look in the potholes and see if you can find the bicyclist. Now, I don't fish a lot, but I do know a lot of fishermen. They always complain there's no Great Lakes in the Omaha area. So this old boy, he caught a 10-pound walleye out of that pothole. He took it down to St. Wenceslas, and they used it as part of the fish fry. So that was at 87th and Blondo. All right, so roads have potholes, and life has potholes as well. We call them different names. Now, you all know that the road of life is not always smooth. If you were asked to describe the quality of your current road, and what your future looks like, there would be some of us that would say it's something like that. Your life is anything but smooth right now. You drive and it's a bumpy road. It's tough sledding. Now we like smooth, but we know from experience that the roads aren't always smooth. So physically healthy is what we like. But there's some of you who right now are not physically healthy. Sickness and disease are something that accompany you every day, and this is a pothole in your life. Emotionally healthy is what we like. There's many of us that deal with depression. There's some of y'all that deal with anxiety. Emotional wellness is something that is a struggle for many of us. Financially content is where we want to be. There's some who are overextended. There's some that are pretty deep in debt, and there's not a lot of financial contentment in your life. When it comes to finances, the road is pretty bumpy. Great relationships is something that is going to dramatically improve our life. If I were to ask you to describe your relationship, some of you would actually say great, and you would say smooth, and we praise God for that. If I were to ask you to define your relationships, there's many of us who would say, yeah, there is one or two relationships, and it's actually a very important one that's very bumpy right now, and this is causing me a lot of difficulty. The best life has no addictions, no compulsions. Reality says that alcoholism, addiction to pills, addiction to pornography, addiction to gambling, that these are all real issues. And these issues will make your road bumpy, and they'll make people you love, it'll make their road bumpy as well. As a parent, I function best when I have two healthy and happy kids, but I live on the planet Earth, and the kids are not always happy, and they're not always healthy, and when they hurt, I hurt as well. All of you who are parent know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm a pastor, we're in a church, so let's talk about God. When things are good, the road is smooth. We're in a close relationship with God. We're growing in that relationship. We can feel God being present in our life. Being spiritually distant from God, having questions of life, wondering where God fits into all this mess means that there's some potholes. The road ahead of us is bumpy. So we're going to look at some lessons from potholes this morning. So potholes are normal and natural. So this picture here was actually taken in Omaha. And I think this picture is so profound because this goose knows nothing different than what it's currently experiencing. To this goose, this pothole is totally normal and totally natural. So Mr. Goose has figured this out, that potholes are going to happen in life and just deal with them. If you live in the top 2/3 of the country, which Nebraska is right in the middle of that area, basically where it freezes for more than a month at a time, potholes are going to be part of your life. So I'll give you some science behind potholes. Actually, I didn't know how this worked. I had to look it up this week. But here's how it works. There's water that collects below the road. December, January, February, the water freezes. It stays frozen. When the water is frozen, it expands. So then when the sun comes out and the water gets the temperature gets warmer, the ice melts, the water goes down into the soil, and it creates like these pockets where the ice used to be. So the car drives over those pockets. The cement can no longer sustain itself, so a little hole is formed. And that's how we get potholes. So there's nothing that you can do to avoid these potholes. They're going to happen in life. Now, just as potholes happen on the roads, potholes are going to happen in our lives as well. And they are totally normal, and they are totally natural. I'm going to tell you some things right now that are totally normal and totally natural. People get sick. That just happens. It's inevitable. Relationships end, addictions happen. Our self-esteem plummets, our anxiety skyrockets, our depression develops, people lose jobs. Our children are a challenge. There's some children here saying my parents are a challenge, and God seems distant. So these things happen. They're normal, they're natural, and we can't control a lot of these things. And that bugs the heck out of some of y'all, because you like to control everything, and you can't control these things. And when you lose control of something that you want to control, that's going to cause you a bunch of grief. So here's a lesson of life about things that you can't control. Now, do not obsess about what you cannot control unless you have a thing for being miserable. So these things that you can't control, there's some of us that worry about these things way too much. Unless you can stop doing that, you're going to experience some pain and some difficulty in your life. So one of the things I want us to think about most potholes is they are not our fault. Now, some of the potholes that you're going to run into in your life are going to be your fault. You're going to make a bad decision, and you're going to have to drive over a pothole for an extended period of time because of your mistake. But most potholes in your life are not going to be your mistake. So it's not your fault when your child got sick. That one wasn't on you. It's not your fault the company you work for restructured and you lost your job. It's not your fault that your child comes home with a broken heart, or your child calls you as an adult from some other place and he or she has a broken heart. That's not your fault. It's not your fault that you feel the way that you feel. So those of you with emotional diseases, like you didn't want this to happen. You didn't create this to happen. It happened, and you're the one who's dealing with it. It's not your fault that your friends spread those rumors about you that were untrue and they hurt you. Now, there's a pretty good chance that most of the potholes that exist in your life are not your fault. So, look at the screen behind me. You may not have caused the pothole, so stop pretending you did. Because when you pretend the pothole is your fault and it's not your fault, you got two problems now. Problem number one, which is more than big enough, is the pothole. Problem number two is the guilt and shame that comes along with the guilt that you actually created the pothole that you did not create. Now, the pothole is a big enough problem that will come. It's inevitable. It's normal. It's natural. The side order of guilt and shame, you don't have to do that one. So let's see what Jesus says about pain and potholes being inevitable. John chapter 16, verse 33, this is Jesus, have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows. So Jesus is saying, like, you will. You're not just going to have some. You're going to have many. There's going to be many potholes in your life, Jesus says. But take heart. Now, in the Greek, I had to look this one up this week because I was curious. So when Jesus says take heart, what he's actually saying is here, like, you're not alone. I'm with you. Don't be afraid. Have courage. Take heart because I, Jesus, have overcome the world. So Jesus here in John chapter 16, verse 33, he knows that life is not easy. He's experienced this, and his life is about to get a whole lot worse. Jesus saying, I've been there, I've done that, I got the t-shirt, and the best is yet to come. Now, did you hear what Jesus, he said? He said, potholes exist. Be courageous. Now, this is the gentle reminder, especially where it says, take heart. I'll give you that peace, take heart. This is a gentle reminder of this, that God is present in our pain. So one of the things that we can understand when we drive on these bumpy roads, when we go through the potholes of life, that God is present with us in our pain. One of my favorite chapters of the Bible is Isaiah chapter 43. Love the whole thing, especially like the first 7 verses. I'm going to give you one verse today. Here Isaiah just gives us this beautiful imagery. He says, when you go through the deep waters. So what's the first word he said? Yeah, he didn't say what. He didn't say if, he said when. So when you go through the deep waters, what's the promise? I'll be with you. When you do the potholes, the bumpy roads, you're not alone, I'm with you. And I'll tell you, I'm going to give you, I forgot to say this at 9, so you guys will be more mature and developed than there if you're listening. Jesus is bigger than any pothole you're ever going to face, just so you know. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames, they will not consume you. And then he continues, for you are my Lord, the God, the Holy One of Israel, who paid Jacob as a ransom for your future. So he gives them a beautiful image that they would be very familiar with. When you go through the waters, you'll not drown. And they've been there and they've done that because they had this Egyptian army chasing them, and there's this raging water in front of them, and it didn't flood. God just stopped the river in its tracks, and they crossed the river into the promised land, and that's where Isaiah was talking from. And then he gives them a vision of the future. When you go into the fire, they don't know what the heck he's talking about here, what we do. When you go into the fire, I will be with you. So there's 3 boys who had enough potholes to last a lifetime, and this guy Nebuchadnezzar caused it for him. And these 3 boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they walked into this fiery furnace to a certain death. That was like this huge pothole, and all of a sudden, Nebuchadnezzar looks in this fiery furnace, and there's not 3 people in there, there's 4. And the 4th one was Jesus. And when we read this in Isaiah 43, when we walk through the fires of life, when we deal with the biggest potholes, we're not alone. God is with us. Now, we got to talk about pain as far as potholes. God is present with us in our pain. Now, I believe that there's some of us that are so adverse to pain that we will avoid it at all cost. And what has happened is we're so adverse to pain that we have sacrificed growth and possibility on the altars of comfort and security. There's some of us that have missed some pretty cool opportunities because we valued security and comfort more than we've valued growth and possibility. If your goal is to avoid pain in life, you're going to be wrong for two reasons. One, it's impossible to avoid pain, so you're going to fail. And number two, by attempting to avoid pain, you're avoiding life. So imagine this. Let's just say that you got like a brand new Tesla. I've actually driven a Tesla before. It's really cool. A friend of mine has one, and I begged him, and he finally acquiesced. It's like that widow that goes up and bugs Jesus, and Jesus finally just lets her do it. So you got a new Tesla. You don't want to go anywhere because there's all these potholes. So what you do is you stay home and you don't go anywhere for 8 weeks. Now you think that's absolutely ridiculous, not going somewhere for 8 weeks because you're afraid of a pothole. But you do this all the time. Like you're doing this right now. You don't ask her out on a date because you're terrified of the pothole of rejection. You don't apply for that job because you're afraid that you're going to fail. You don't go to the gym because you're afraid of the pothole that people might look at you kind of weird because you don't exactly know what you're doing. You don't look like you fit in. So what we do is we sacrifice growth and possibility on the altars of security and comfort. So yesterday I was standing right here, wearing a suit and a bow tie. I was very handsome yesterday. I had this little bow tie on, and I... Seriously, Corey? Just kidding. I love Corey. What was I talking about? Oh, the wedding. So this couple, Kinsey, she's come here for 8 years. Justin, he's come here for 18 months after he met Kinsey. So, there's this great risk that these two people are taking. This risk is that one of them one day is going to break the other person's heart. That's the risk that goes along with standing right here. Now, the possibility, they're endless. Kids, companionship, forgiveness, kindness, laughter. And what they were doing yesterday is they were saying, okay, we are going to put the idols of comfort and security aside. We're going to say yes to the possibilities of growth and grace and expansion. All right, so number 2. I was very thorough on number 1. I got 5 of these things. Not sure if we're going to get done on time. I was thinking next year, I turned 50, and it's in February, and it's on a Sunday. So if you were here 10 years ago, do you remember that sermon I did, 40 Things I Learned in 40 Years? Well, the really cool thing about this, I only have to, 80% of it's done. I just got to come up with 10 things I've learned in the last 10 years. Now, the problem is, that's a good long sermon, so I was thinking I'd give the band a day off. No, I'm just joking. I would have them come in and at least sing the last song as y'all are leaving. But that's 10 months down the road, so... All right, complaining about potholes doesn't fix the situation. So this one was taken in Des Moines, and what this guy did is, these are all the hubcaps that have been lost at this pothole outside his house. So it's kind of like this passive-aggressive way of complaining. And so here's the deal about complaining and potholes. Unless your buddy is driving an orange truck with a bunch of tar in the back, and he's within 100 yards of where you currently are, complaining is not going to fix your pothole. It just won't. So here's my favorite Bible verse for Benjamin and David. I'm just going to let this one speak for itself. I have nothing to add. Um, cool. So, do you know there's actually websites about potholes? Like, there's websites about like complain about potholes. Seriously? Like, if you're on these websites, like I can find something for you to do. Like, we have trash around here that needs to be picked up, bathrooms that need to be cleaned, people that need to. I can take care of that for you. You have better things to do with your life. So when the potholes of life come our way, we can do one of two things. You can't do both. You can do one of two things. You can complain. That's option number one, or you can change things. You can't do both. You can do one. You can complain or you can change things. Now, what do you want to spend your time doing? So I was thinking about this with an entitlement or with complaining. I was just thinking about this week. So the way I figured it out, entitlement is going to be the parent of complaining. You know, there's some people that think that they're entitled to drive on a smooth surface. But science says, like in Nebraska, that's not going to happen unless, like every fall, if they go and they retar every single road. But then you're going to complain anyway about all the roads being closed, like during football season. So we're going to complain about something anyway. Now, do you know who was hurt by the complaining? It's the complainer. Like, this is a self-destructive behavior. So you have a negative worldview. That's going to be devastating. I mean, you got two choices. You can be positive, you can be negative. Complain is a negative worldview. That gets you absolutely nowhere, and it gets you there fast. Complaining is going to diminish your credibility with other people. No one likes to listen to a complainer. We just don't like that. Now, there's a difference between complaining, which comes from entitlement. You know, I'm entitled to this. When this doesn't happen, I have every right to share my frustration why this doesn't happen. Complaining comes from entitlement. There's something a whole lot better. Authenticity and vulnerability, they're going to come from our natural fears. Authenticity and vulnerability are absolutely critical. For us to overcome the potholes of life. Complaining is just this dumb behavior that diminishes our credibility, hurts us, and wastes time. So let's talk about the vulnerability for just a moment. So we need, there's someone you need in your life, okay? You need somebody in your life. We need safe people in our lives, people who will listen to us, people who will empathize with us, and don't tell us how we should feel. Like, pet peeve number one here is if someone tells me how I should feel. How I feel is how I feel. It's a natural emotion. Nobody can control our natural emotions. We need people who will focus on caring and not curing. Many of the potholes, we just can't get a cure. We need someone to sit with us and be present with us. So caring over curing, and people who allow us to be authentic and vulnerable. So here's how this would work. Complaining, let's just say we're going to send a kid to college next year, and complain will say, gosh, it's been so fast these last 18 years, and I'm not ready for this. This is terrible. Like, that's me complaining about sending Benjamin to college. Now, me being authentic and vulnerable would be going to my friend John, who's sitting in the front row, and I would, I'll teach you for sitting in the front row. I picked on Corey, now I'm picking on John. Tracy, you're next. And I would go up to John, and I would say, so John, I want to talk to you for a little bit if I can. I know you've sent Phil and Liz, well, I've known you for 14 years, to college. So I'm kind of struggling with sending Benjamin away, and I'm afraid, do you think me and you could talk about this? And he would listen to me. He would care and not cure. He wouldn't judge. He would accept me because he's been there. He's done that. So that's authentic and vulnerable conversation. It's 10 times better than complaining. All right, number 3. Sometimes you just have to brace and take the hit. So you guys know what I'm talking about? So I went to Emmanuel Hospital yesterday morning to visit one of y'all, and I was going south on 72nd Street because I didn't know that my son had driven the car the night before, like 100 miles. So I was almost out of gas. That wasn't complaining. That was me being authentic and vulnerable to y'all. Actually, that was probably complaining. I'm sorry. The preacher's got to tell the truth sometimes too. So there's someone right next to me on the right-hand side, and then there's someone coming north on 72nd Street. And I couldn't, run either car. So there was this great big pothole, and I just, grabbed onto the wheel, I clenched my teeth, and I hit it hard. And, sometimes you just got to do that, right? That's the way it is. And sometimes the bumpy road of life will mean that we just have to brace and take some hits. So think about the butterfly. Just like the butterfly would never soar without overcoming significant adversity, wisdom is the product of experiencing and conquering the world's wounds. So it's like this beautiful picture. This caterpillar becomes a butterfly, but there's that really goofy, awkward, 2 or 3 day stage called chrysalis where it starts to break through the cocoon, and it's got all that slime, and it's got to get rid of all that stuff before it can fly, and it's just working its muscles, and it's growing, and then all of a sudden it just takes off, and it's free, and it flies, and it's absolutely beautiful. And unless it went through that struggle, it could have never, ever, it had to brace, it had to take the hit, it had to do what was necessary to get better. So think about, I'll just give you an example. Let's just say that you're in debt. Okay, you just got to brace up and take the hit and take care of it. So the first thing you do is you make a budget. The second thing you do is you try to figure out how to make more money. The third thing you do is you figure out how to try to spend less money. And you brace, you take the hit, and eventually, it could be a year, it could be 10 years, you're going to have freedom in your life because you won't have debt over your head anymore. But you got to brace and take the hit before you do that. So some of you, I'm going to give an example that is just so personal and so close and so real to some of you. There was a day that you didn't feel well. You went to the doctor called you and told you had cancer. So what you did is you braced and you took the hit. Some of you went through chemotherapy. Some of you went through radiation. Some of you did surgery. Some of you did 2 of those 3 things. Some of you did 3 of those 3 things. You have showed us what strong is all about. You have showed the rest of us what courage is all about. Now, for some of you at the end of that process, there's this smooth road in front of you called remission. For some of you, unfortunately, there's just more potholes in front of you. We don't know, but what you've done is you have shown the rest of us what it means to be strong and what it means to be courageous. Now, for all of us on a bumpy road, I want us to remember the caterpillar. The caterpillar did not have the entitlement to go from a caterpillar to a butterfly and just fly away and be free. It had to work, literally, its wings off to get to the place where it can fly. Now, there was fight before freedom. There was pain before prevailing. There was suffering before smooth roads. Now, Paul, he knows about this. He says in Romans chapter 3, verses 3 through 5. But that's not all. We gladly suffer because we know that suffering helps us to endure. And endurance builds character, which gives us a hope that never will disappoint. So hope, as Paul is saying, comes through suffering. I was talking to a colleague this week about a pothole in her life. She's a Methodist pastor in another state. I just got to know her in the last few months, and she ran into a big pothole at her church just a couple weeks ago. I'm trying to help her through this time, and I asked her a question, and I didn't use the phrase pothole because I hadn't done the sermon yet, but I asked her, I said, have you ever made it through a really difficult time before? And she didn't have to think about it, and she did not describe a pothole. She described the collapse of a road. So she talked about how she had to leave her husband when her 2 kids were little. He gave her no choice. I assume there was some abuse. She didn't say that. She stayed home. She had no money. She had no job. Her and her kids, they were homeless. They lived in a car. She found a job. A few months later, she found a place to live. She felt called by God to do the ministry. She went to seminary. Why she had the job, why she was raising the kids. She got ordained as an elder. She's a pastor now. She's got a bunch of potholes in front of her. And I told her this. I said, you got some tough days in front of you. But I actually talked about the caterpillar language. I said, you got wings that are stronger than you can ever believe or ever imagine. And this bump in the road, this pothole, it's not going to slow you down one bit. It is going to change your direction, but it will not slow you down because you've been through tougher. Now, through all of us who are going through the potholes of life, for all of us who are on a bumpy road, you have been through tougher before, and you can do this. You'll keep doing this. You'll keep doing this with God's grace. Now, there's one more I want to talk about, and this is that damages can be fixed. Damages can be fixed. Now, isn't this a beautiful picture? God, I wish I could frame that, put it in my bedroom or something. Okay, I put it in the dining room. That's fine. So I don't mind driving over. I've never been so happy actually to drive over a 1/4 inch of tar. It feels so nice. I mean, compared to driving 9 inches of nothing. So potholes can be fixed. Let's talk about a big pothole that existed in the life of one of Jesus' friends. So Jesus had 2 women that he was very close with, Mary and Martha. They had a brother whose name was Lazarus. So Jesus was gone. They lived in a town called Bethany. It was about 3 or 4 miles from Jerusalem. So next Sunday, when we talk about Palm Sunday and the parade, Jesus would have been coming from Bethany to go to Jerusalem. He actually went back to Bethany before he went to Jerusalem to die. So he would have seen Mary and Martha, and he saw Mary and Martha. This is another time, it was long before that. He sees Mary and Martha. They're very upset. And they said that while you're gone, Lazarus died. So the first and only time in the 4 Gospels that an emotion of Jesus was recorded, this emotion of weeping, we find it here. The Bible says when he heard this, Jesus wept. So Jesus, he went to the place where Lazarus was buried. He looks for Lazarus, and listen to what he says. Jesus called out in a thunderous voice, Lazarus, come out. Then the man who was dead walked out of his tomb. I love that word. He walked out of his tomb, bound from head to shoulder or head to toe in a burial shroud. Now, when Benny ran over that pothole, he actually popped the tire and hurt the rim. So I had to drive from here to Millard North, fix the tire, at least put the spare one on. I took it to the discount tire. They said, well, the tire's under warranty. It's fine, we'll replace it, but your rim is actually bent. They showed it to me. They wanted $400 for a new one, or I could buy 4 of those kind of cool ones that are black and gray for $600. And so I ended up finding a guy a couple weeks later that fixed it for $100. He was at Village Point just working out of his truck, and I took it to him, and he was somewhere else in the afternoon. I went and picked it up. So about probably 10 hours of me messing around and calling and driving, and $118, I got the tire fixed. Now, if you see Benjamin driving around in his car, 2 things. Watch out, he's still not a very good driver. And 2, think about this. You would never know that his tire was ever broken, because damages from potholes and bumpy roads can be fixed. Now, the world is full of bumps and bruises and hurts and heartaches, and the world is also full of people overcoming such things. So I've got one more story, then I'm done. So there's a girl that used to go to this church. She moved out state a while back. She went through this incredibly painful time in her life, probably 7, 8 years ago. Young, she was in her late 20s at the time, probably mid-30s now. Her husband left her. Ever since she was a teenager, she dealt with eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, that kind of stuff. She just was not able to sleep after her husband left. She got addicted to sleeping pills. Every time I'd see her, there was something else. And, money was an issue for her. He was kind of the big earner of the household, her not so much. And she actually moved. It was just too much for her to live here. We kind of kept track of each other on Facebook. And I remember once she wrote this blog post, and it was about how she overcame her addiction to sleeping pills. And it was just absolutely gorgeous how she did this. It wasn't easy for her. She had to brace and take the hit. A lot of sleepless nights and withdrawals, but she did it. She started eating really healthy, started exercising a lot. Finally she was able to put the demons of the eating disorder behind her. Now there's still potholes. I mean, she's, I don't think you're ever done with this. Every once in a while when she gets down, she'll eat a bunch of pizza and she'll start again the next day and, try to be better. Her self-esteem, which was probably about a 0 on a scale of 1 to 10, it was just so cool to, from afar, see the confidence come back. I remember one day she called me, and I hadn't talked to her for probably 3 years at this point, I'm guessing. And I knew why she was calling me. Like, you just don't call a pastor out of the blue that you're kind of mildly affiliated with. And she had found a guy. They're going to get married, and she wanted to know if I would do the wedding. And I told her, of course, I would. So I went to some little lake somewhere in Nebraska that's not in Omaha. And I had to drive there. It wasn't a pothole. It was a legit lake. So we were doing the wedding. I didn't know anybody there, which is just painful for an introvert. But got up and I did the wedding, and I started talking. Most of my weddings, I'll talk about the bride for a little bit and the groom for a little bit, then God for a little bit. And I started talking about her, and she just broke down and started crying. Then I broke down. I started crying. She had her fiance to hold her. I was up there all alone. So I blubbered and I cried my way through that whole wedding the rest of the time. And I was actually thinking about this when I was composing to myself once. Jesus wept. And the reason that Jesus wept is because he knew that a dead person was going to come back to life. The reason that I was weeping is because I saw this dead person and she had come back to life. She had been over every stinking pothole. Her road was as bumpy gets. And here she is, as beautiful can be, with a smile on her face, knowing that she has survived. And that's what I tell you right now, if her story is your story, don't quit, continue. Stick with it. You can do this. You can do this through your strength and your power. You can do this with the community and the help of others, and you can do this, most of all, with God's love and God's grace and your power and God's power. So let's go to God and let us pray. Lord, we come to you in just all these different positions in life, and God, I know right now that this sermon wasn't overly relevant to some people, and I just praise you for that, because their road is pretty smooth right now and life is pretty good. And God, for their stories, for their testimony, for where they are in life right now, I and all of us just give you thanks and praise that road is smooth, and we pray that it continues to be smooth and even gets smoother. Lord, I know that there's some people right now that just feel like their life is lived at 168th and Center Street, where the potholes are just almost unbearable. And Lord, we just go from one pothole to another. The road is bumpy, and as far as we can see in the distance, the road just gets bumpier. Well, Lord, remind us that you raised someone who was dead to life again. Remind us, Lord, that this is a season that we can let stuff die. we can come back here in 2 weeks and we can experience new life. Lord, I just want to pray right now for all of us who just deal with like emotional diseases. Lord, that you'll just help us and empower us to persevere and make it over these potholes. And Lord, have hope that there is smoother roads in front of us. Lord, to all those who are dealing with relational dysfunction, God, just let there be peace, let there be understanding, let there be listening. Lord, let there be healing. God, let there be new beginnings. Lord, there's certainly financial potholes. There's all sorts of potholes that exist. And God, when we need comforted, comfort us. When we need your presence, we know that you're with us, and just help us to embrace that presence and know and claim the truth that you are bigger than any and all of our potholes. And Lord, there's some of us that have come here this morning and we weren't expecting to be spoken to. And Lord, you're a God of grace. You're a God that surprises us. And Lord, I pray that all of us, regardless of where we are in life, we'll just leave this place a little bit different than what we came. God, send us back out to our communities. Let us be those safe people, Lord, that people can share with and talk to. So, Lord, we come now in the one who raises the dead back to life, and we pray in his name the prayer that he taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Hey, just one thing before we go today. As you're leaving, we have a bunch of the little yard signs. They're purple. They have all the times and dates of our Easter worship experiences. This is such a non-threatening way. It's such a fun way to invite your neighbors to worship with us. If you live kind of on a busy street near a busy intersection, you can take two and put one of those at the corner as well. Just invite our community to worship with us on Easter and the days that lead up to that. So have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you next week here on Palm Sunday at the Water's Edge.